Title: The Daughters of Rain and Legacy. The rain drummed steadily on the roof of the black Mercedes-Benz parked beneath the flickering lights of a rural gas station in northern Georgia. The night was bitter, the kind that clung to your skin and reminded you that warmth was a privilege, not a right. Inside the car, tension was thick as steel. Calvin Drake, the wealthy CEO of Drake International Hospitality Group, stared coldly ahead through the windshield, his manicured fingers tapping against the Italian leather steering wheel. In the back seat sat three girls, identical in appearance, each 14, each trembling in soaked jackets, each bearing the weight of fresh grief. "Get out," Calvin said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. His gray eyes were devoid of warmth. "Your mother is gone. You're no longer my responsibility." The girls didn't move. Rain streaked down the glass, refracting the harsh glow of the gas station's fluorescent lights across their stunned faces. "But Dad," the girl closest to him began, her voice shaking. "I'm not your father," Calvin snapped, adjusting his silk tie. "I never was." That was the moment their world shattered. The girl who had spoken, Melanie, clutched a tarnished locket around her neck. "But Mom just died," she whispered, as if her sorrow might soften him. Calvin didn't look at them. "She left everything to me. That's all you need to know. I never wanted kids. Especially not," he paused, the unsaid words thick in the air. Not three biracial girls who reminded him of the man their mother had loved before him. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a crisp envelope. "I gave a station attendant $200. Call someone. I'm sure you'll figure it out." "We have no one," the quietest of the three, Elise, murmured. "Mom was all we had." Calvin didn't respond. He simply opened the door and stepped out, the rain instantly soaking his designer suit. Without another word, he slid back into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, driving away into the dark. The red taillights disappeared into the night. The girls were left standing on the concrete beneath the awning, their small suitcases at their feet, thunder rolling in the distance. Melanie opened the locket, revealing a photo of the three of them with their mother. "She told me to keep this safe," she said, her voice barely audible. "Said it was more valuable than it looked." Inside, behind the photo, was a tiny brass key. They had no idea what it opened. Not yet. Elise shivered. "What do we do?" The tallest sister, Simone, squared her shoulders and looked into the dark. "We survive," she said. "And someday, he'll regret everything he did." The station attendant, a man in his 60s named James Withers, approached them carefully. "Girls," he said kindly, "why don't you come inside? My wife says y'all can stay with us tonight. We'll figure something out." But before they could move, a sleek black Lincoln pulled into the lot, headlights slicing through the storm. A woman stepped out, holding an umbrella over her head. She was in her 50s, dressed in a navy coat with sharp features and clear, intelligent eyes. "Are you the Drake girls?" she asked. The girls nodded slowly. "My name is Renee Calder. I was your mother's attorney. I've been looking for you." She opened the door. "Get in. There's something you need to know." 25 years later, Calvin Drake stood in his Manhattan office, the empire of Drake International rising around him in glass and steel. At 62, he looked every inch the magnate. Silver hair at the temples, bespoke suit, and gold cufflinks bearing the Drake lion. He had rebuilt his life after his wife's death, turning her modest hotel chain into a global brand. No one knew the truth behind the empire, not the board, not the media, not even his investors. That it had all started with her. That it was her vision, her plans, her genius. And certainly, no one knew about the three girls he had left behind. "Mr. Drake," his assistant called, standing in the doorway, "the board is ready for you." Calvin nodded, not turning from the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I'll be there shortly." What he didn't know was that the empire he'd built was about to be reclaimed. As he entered the boardroom, his CFO, Philip Grant, rose uncomfortably. "Calvin, before we begin, there's something you should hear." Calvin raised a brow. "Go on." "Lancaster Equity has pulled out of the bid for the Gilded Orchid chain." "What?" "What?" "They were bought out this morning by a firm called Triplets Holdings. Private equity, newly formed, but incredibly well-funded. Calvin frowned. Who's behind it? Philip hesitated. They've requested to meet you now. The doors opened. 3 women entered. Late 30s. Impeccably dressed. Radiating calm, confidence. Calvin's heart stopped. He knew those faces. Melanie, Simone, and Elise. All grown, and all staring directly at him. "Hello, Calvin," Simone said. "It's been a long time," Elise added softly. "We're here to discuss the future of Drake International," Melanie said, placing a thick folder on the table. Calvin stared. "You can't be serious." "We are," Simone replied. "We've acquired controlling interest in your real estate division. Now we're prepared to acquire Drake International." Philip cleared his throat. "Calvin, I've seen their numbers. It's a strong offer." Calvin exploded. "You think you could just walk in here and take?" "We're not asking," Melanie said, her voice firm. "We've been preparing for this for 25 years. They laid it out for him. The gas station had belonged to Renee Calder's uncle. Their mother had predicted Calvin's betrayal and created a separate trust for her daughters. Hidden, legal, protected. Inside that trust was the original business model, the foundation of Drake Hotels. The sisters had used it to build Tri-Point Holdings. Simone became a lawyer and business strategist. Melanie studied design and architecture. Elise mastered hospitality management and branding. They'd built their legacy in silence, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment was now. Calvin's face drained of color when Melanie opened her locket and pulled out the small brass key. "It opened a safe deposit box," she said, "with everything you thought you destroyed." Simone placed the documents on the table. Original plans, financials, the signed trust agreement, records of your asset diversion, forged will. "We have it all. You have 24 hours to accept our offer," Elise said, "or we go public." The boardroom was silent. Later that day, Calvin sat alone in his penthouse, staring at an old photo he'd received anonymously. Catherine Drake, his late wife, smiling beside a tall black man, holding 3 newborns. Written on the back, the true founders of Drake Hotels, Catherine and David Langston, with their daughters Melanie, Simone, and Elise. Then his email pinged. An alert from the bank. All accounts frozen, pending a federal investigation. And then another knock. FBI Special Agent Charles Tanner. "Mr. Drake," he said, "we need to talk about some irregularities in your financial records." Calvin was arrested that night. In his holding cell, stripped of power and pride, he finally saw his empire for what it was, built on betrayal and theft. His lawyer arrived the next day, pale and anxious. "Calvin, the board voted. They've accepted Tri-Point's offer. You've lost the company." "You can't do this to me," Calvin hissed. "You did this to yourself." The lawyer slid a settlement across the table. "If you resign and cooperate, they'll drop the civil charges. But the FBI, that's out of their hands." When the sisters arrived to present the terms, Calvin could barely meet their eyes. "I made mistakes," he whispered. "Mistakes?" Simone said. "You abandoned us in the rain." Calvin tried to explain. He was grieving. He found a letter from Catherine suggesting he might be their biological father. He panicked. "I didn't know how to love you," he said, "because you reminded me of everything I wasn't." "You could have chosen differently," Melanie replied. "But you didn't." Calvin looked at them, so powerful, so poised, so much like their mother. "You're my daughters," he said quietly. "Aren't you?" Melanie reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed letter. It was from Catherine. They had found it in the same deposit box as the documents. She had written, "Steve Langston is not your biological father. Calvin is. But Steve was the father who chose you, who raised you. Love is the only thing that defines a family." "Yes," Melanie said softly. "You're our father by blood. But Steve Langston was our dad." Calvin nodded, tears in his eyes. Then came the final blow. Renee entered with an update from Agent Tanner. The FBI had tested the medication Catherine had been taking. Tampered. Overdosed. Combined with a sedative she'd never been prescribed. There was more. Linda Vasquez, the longtime housekeeper, had kept the bottles. She remembered Calvin's obsession with administering her meds himself. The autopsy had been wrong. The death certificate had been altered. "You poisoned our mother," Elise said, her voice shaking. I didn't mean to, Calvin muttered. I was trying to help her sleep. I didn't know it would. But the evidence was overwhelming. The trial came quickly. The sisters testified. So did Linda. So did the forensic analysts. Calvin Drake was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. 3 months later, the Drake International Hotel's banner was taken down. In its place, a new name gleamed in gold letters: Langston Catherine Hotels. The launch gala was packed with guests. Linda, Renee, the Withers family, teachers, mentors, employees, survivors. The sisters stood on stage. We built this in their name, Melanie said, gesturing to the giant photo of Catherine and Steve Langston. In the name of love, not blood. In the name of the future. They toasted to justice, to family, to a legacy reborn from the rain.